Yeah, I have to end early enough so I can go put on pants. Basically sitting here in my pajamas. So
This is episode 13 of Ruminate, a podcast about what's on our mind. I'm Rob Lewis, and with me as always is John Voorhees. Good morning, John.
hey, Rob, how you doing?
I'm very, very well, John. How are you?
Better than you were, I think, right? I mean, you were sick. I'm doing just fine. I mean, it's cold in Chicago as usual, but I'm hanging in there. Are you feeling better?
Yeah, definitely. I think last week would have been a pretty interesting show if I tried to record.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're back. We're back after a
good.
week.
Yeah. It's been kind of a weird schedule the last couple of months, really, because first we did the shows came out like clockwork, but you and I recorded 2 back-to-back during the holidays because of our schedules, and then you promptly got sick after the holidays. So we skipped a week, but we are back, and we're actually going to do this show that's going to come out on Monday, tomorrow, and then we're going to do another one next weekend, which will come out the following Monday. So we got 2 weeks in a row coming up.
Absolutely. I'm a big believer in the schedule, and I was very disappointed that I had to cancel last week.
Well, that's going to happen eventually to one of us. So
yeah, absolutely.
It's good to hear you're feeling better. Well, do you want to dive in?
Yeah, let's dive in. I think the first thing, this is kind of in follow-up. This is the Chapters app. I think we mentioned this on the last show. This is a Mac app for adding chapters to podcasts. This got released, I think it was the morning just before the last show got released. So if you listened to the last episode, you would have seen that we had chapters and just chapter markers for the different sections. And we were the first non-beta podcast to be released using the Chapters app, which was quite nice.
Yeah, it was pretty funny because that Monday morning I woke up to 2 things, 2 messages, one from you and one from Federico. And yours was, I just use this app to make chapters in our show. And Federico's was, there's this Chapters app that you really should write a review of because you have a podcast. So all of a sudden I was like, oh, okay. I think Robb already took care of it, and that's perfect because kind of use that as the example of how we went about doing it, and then start playing with it myself.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there was a couple of issues. Me being kind of the first person, or we were the first show to kind of use it once it was out. There was a couple of issues with ID3 metadata tags, the different versions, and iTunes uses version 2.2, which doesn't support chapters. But the developer has actually added support now, so you can kind of convert the file within the Chapters app. So yeah, that was kind of the one problem I did have. But I tweeted the developer, and he kind of got back to me and said this is the problem. But yeah, the updated version kind of supports all that, so it should be even easier for this show.
Yeah, that was kind of interesting to me because when I was communicating back and forth with him when I was working on the review, and I guess in his experience, at least with his beta testers, most of them were using command line tools to do their encoding, and as a result, he didn't run into the iTunes GarageBand, ID3 tag version 2.2 problem, which is surprising to me that there aren't more people just kind of exporting directly out of GarageBand, at least within his beta group. But it's fixed now. The thing with 2.2 is that I don't think there's even it's not you can't really say that ID3 tags are a standard. It's not really it's a project by a small group of people, but it's not really, it's not a standard spotty or anything. And the version 2.2 just didn't have support for tags at all, but 2.3 and 2.4 do. And in fact, actually, iTunes has support for 2.3 and 2.4. It's just not the default, and there's no way to switch it in settings. You can actually go into an MP3 file. This is probably way more information than anybody wants to know, but you can go in to an MP3, right click on it, and choose I think it's like upgrade tags or something like that, and it brings them up to either 2.3 or 2.4. And that's how I did it when I was testing. Is that how you did it, Rob?
I didn't know that was a feature, actually. I think you found that while you were doing your review. So what I actually did was went back into GarageBand and exported as an MP3. because I kind of knew that it would have the right version on it then.
Oh, okay, yeah. So it's a nice app because it's real simple. I mean, all you do is point it at your MP3, put in your. There's a whole bunch of ways to find the points where you want to put the chapters in, edit them, give them titles, and then export it back out with the tags embedded. I think once you got beyond the ID3 tag issue, it only took you a few minutes, right?
Oh yeah, I mean it was. I was actually at work, and I was just kind of right. I'll just take 5 minutes to do this. And I mean, even including the problems I had with the versioning with the ID3 tags, it literally maybe 5 or 10 minutes it took me to do that. And came through an overcast, it worked perfectly. So yeah, I mean we kind of have a fairly short show compared to others, but chapters are still nice if people want to skip a particular section, or they want to jump to a particular section. And I think actually when it comes to it, if we need to refer back to an episode, it will be nice and easy to get to those sections as well.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's besides just linking to a specific spot within the audio, you can also associate a URL with the title that you create, which is kind of nice. So if you're talking about the chapters app, you could put a link to the app right in the chapter's title, so someone doesn't even have to scroll down to the show notes, which is nice feature. I've seen the Accidental Tech podcast do that a few times.
Yeah, I actually didn't, until you mentioned that, I didn't realise that was a feature. I just assumed that it was underlined because it was the chapter. But yeah, as you say, it's kind of nice to add some extra data in there if you need it. And I think ATP do it with the sponsors and every now and again with like blog posts and things like that.
Right. So the app is $15 US on the Mac App Store. It's the kind of app I like just because it does one thing very, very well. I know that the developer is working to add some other podcast-friendly features to it, like editing the main ID3 tags that you use for a podcast, like the artist information, the title information, the artwork, that sort of thing. That's not out yet, but I think he's working on that. And I'd really like to see that, because then, I mean, you've really taken care of the lion's share of the metadata type stuff all in one place, which would be pretty cool. But we'll link to the review I did if anybody's interested in checking the app out a little more. Yeah,
as you say, with that, with the extra features, with the, editing the actual ID3 tags, if he decides to put that into the app, I mean, that would be extremely useful, because I could then get rid of iTunes from the workflow of editing the podcast. I can just go straight from GarageBand into chapters, and then it's ready to go.
Right, and that removes definitely an extra step in the process. So I think that would be a good. Hopefully that comes out soon, because I think that would be a nice thing to have.
Yeah, definitely.
So you were going to give us another update on the paint drying, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is probably going to be the final update on this. So the classification people, they allegedly watched it. I mean, I guess there's no real way to prove whether they genuinely did watch it or not, but they've given it a U rating. I'm not sure.
What's a U rating?
So U is like that's kind of the lowest. So anybody can watch that. Kids, right up to adults. That's kind of I think it stands for universal.
Okay, nothing offensive in paint drying, I guess.
No, absolutely. I'm not sure what the US equivalent of that is, but
we have one called G, which I think is for general audiences, which I think that's probably the same thing.
Right, yeah, that sounds about right. So yeah, it was 607 minutes final running time. So it's it's just over 10 hours. And
that's a lot of paint drying.
So in the description it says no material likely to offend or harm. So
yeah, I think that's probably true. Huh, interesting. Well, I hope we see more paint drying movies, because those people need something to do.
Absolutely. I'm not sure whether it proved a point or not, but it was kind of interesting that they at least claimed to have watched it. I think they may have even tweeted about it and said they've got through half of it. They're going to finish the other half the next day. So
oh, that's funny. Yeah, well, it's one of those things. It's one of those internet things that takes off, right? So before, maybe they're hoping to make a 2 or 3 hour movie, and before you know, it's up to 10.
Yeah, absolutely. So you you've added this link, and I did have a quick look at this, but Ben sent this to us. Do you want to tell us a little bit about this?
Oh, yeah, Ben thought this would be a story that we'd like, and I did like it. I guess it's where he used to live. It's a house he used to live in, and it was a story in the Telegraph about I guess it's near a train station, and the woman who lives there now was tired of people parking in her driveway in her private parking space when they went to the train to go to work, and instead of getting them ticketed or getting them towed or whatever most people would do, she unloaded a ton of gravel behind the person's car and left a little shovel with a note that said, "At least it's not raining." And it was stuck there for, the car was stuck there for a couple of days until they could get the gravel removed. I thought it was pretty fun, a pretty funny story. Kind of passive aggression at its very best.
Yeah, this is just kind of this is such a kind of British thing. Just don't do the right thing. Let's do the really annoying thing. It's
a lot of effort, and I'm sure a ton of gravel costs a fair amount of money too. Maybe she needed to do the gravel anyway.
I think in the story it mentions that actually that some builders turned up to re-gravel her driveway, but because this car was there, they couldn't do it.
That's right. I was forgetting that.
So
right.
That's why she had access to this ton of gravel. So she just kind of left it behind the car.
That's great.
So, I think it's probably enough from a passive-aggressive corner.
Yeah, that was good. So I had a little mini topic that I was going to bring up. Just kind of it's just a little story about something I was working on yesterday on Blink. And there is a long-standing bug in the iOS App Store, which, right, shocker, right? The App Store is not perfect.
A bug in the App Store, John, I will not hear of it.
This bug has been there since iOS 7, and people have reported it over and over again. But if you go to the Update tab and you look at the apps that have updated on your phone, and you tap on one of them so you get the full store view of that app, and then you use the share button to try to share that app. If you're on the update, if you do it from the Update tab, all it will do is send out the title of the app. It won't send the link to the app. And that's been in there forever, and it trips people up all the time. Developers get caught by it all the time because, they see that their app's updated, they go into the Update tab, they copy the link, and they tweet it out. And then all of a sudden they realize, oh, wait, I just tweeted out the title and nothing else. Nobody can get to my app. And that's been there since, as I said, iOS 7. I had a workaround for it in Blink where basically I grab the title, do a search of the iTunes API, and return a list of apps. And because you're using the title, it's a very specific string of words, it rarely returns more than a couple of results. So what I did at the time was I limited the results to like 15 results because, there was no reason to do more because it rarely returned more than a handful of results. And it's just easier when you have you're returning fewer results, especially if you're on a bad network. It's just quicker. So I limited it. Fast forward to, I don't know when they added this. It was either 8 or 9. They added the little share button. If you highlight text on, say, Safari, you have copy, paste, bold, that sort of thing. But there's also share. And if you tap on share, you can go into the share sheet and use your extensions. Well, turns out, I don't know how many people are doing this. I don't think very many, but it works with Blink. So you find the name of an app that's not linked to the store in an article, you can highlight it, tap the share button, and then look it up on Blink and get an affiliate link and whatnot. The problem was that because I was limited to 15 and because store search is not the best in the world, it wasn't enough results. So what I did yesterday was it was pretty easy. It took like 10 minutes. I just I tied it not to. I didn't hard code it to 15 anymore. I set it to whatever someone has in their settings. So it'll return up to 50 results now. And it was it was a real problem for Mac apps. If you're searching for apps, a lot of times the Mac apps are buried pretty far down the page because they just don't have the sales of the profile of the iOS apps.
Yeah, it sounds like one of those things that it's probably quite hard to see that coming. Like as a, they kind of added the share on the highlight And I'd be pretty impressed if you'd kind of seen that that use case come in. But like you say, you switched it to the settings. That's probably a better way of doing it.
Right. Well, and it was just one of those things where that's the bug that keeps on giving for me, because I would never have even had that in the app, and had it not been for the bug. But now, instead of having to do that from scratch, now it took like 5 minutes to support the new feature a little better than I was in the past. So, one of those things. I guess you got to celebrate the little things like that when they happen, when something's easy.
Yeah, definitely. I do remember, I guess it must have been when you were first working on Blink, and I remember you tweeting about the update bug, and to be honest, the state of Apple software right now, it doesn't surprise me that bug's kind of still there.
Yeah, and the problem with the bug is, too, you don't run into it very often, or not many people do, and when they do, they're completely confused because you're hitting the share button from a screen that looks just like it would if you went through the search or the features page or any of the other pages. It's identical. It's just that it's not serving out the link for some reason, and that's been there. It feels like forever to me, but I guess it's been about 2-3 years at least. Yeah, well, never mind. I mean, maybe they'll fix that. Maybe they won't. I mean, I don't know if you've listened to the latest talk show, but Eddie Q and Craig Federighi were on it, and they seem to have a lot of numbers that suggest that their software's really good. So I'm not expecting any updates anytime soon. Yeah, well, we could go into a list of things that have been breaking for us, I suppose. But there have been bugs. There's no doubt about that. Yeah, definitely. Do you want to move on to tea towels, Rob? I saw you got a little upset on Twitter about tea towels, and you confused me. I had no idea what's going on. What was up with tea towels last week? So we did our online. We did our food shopping online from a different supermarket than we normally use. And because it was our first time using them, they gave us a welcome tea towel, and we'll get into that in a minute. And I kind of made a joke that I probably won't want to use. Basically, I said it made me deeply uncomfortable that it won't match my other tea towels. It's kind of a tongue-in-cheek kind of joke. It's fine. It's a tea towel. I would still use it. But yeah, I kind of made this joke, and I seem to have confused a lot of Americans as to when I mentioned tea towels. So it wasn't just me. Good. It wasn't. All right, explain yourself. What's a tea towel? Do you want to know what tea towel is? So I think it's what you would call like a kitchen towel. Like a small towel that you have in the kitchen for, I don't know, drying your hands and wiping things down, that kind of thing. Does that... Right. That makes sense. Is a kitchen towel what I'm describing? Yeah, I think so. Yes. All right. So when you spill your tea, you can wipe it up with your tea towel. Absolutely, yeah. But it's not it's not exclusively for tea related activities. It's okay. It's what you would call a kitchen towel. So all right. So I'm glad we've got that cleared up. Yeah, it's not nearly as interesting as I thought it was going to be. I thought it was probably something like that. I had more of a vision of you sitting and having a proper cup of tea, and you were bringing out your crumpets on your tea towel or something like that. Your tea cookies and all those things. That's amazing. Anyway, all right. Well, we'll leave that mini topic there for people to think about and think about their own tea towels. Another thing we thought we'd talk about today is subscription pricing, because I ran into this Wired article a week or two ago that seemed to suggest that subscription pricing was the way that all apps were going to be sold from now on, and that this was a new and revolutionary thing, which I thought was ridiculous, because subscription pricing has been around for a long time, and it just doesn't. It works for some things, but it doesn't work for others. I thought it was just a kind of a gross oversimplification of the entire issue from the App Store perspective. Yeah, definitely. I think this has probably been triggered a lot by the Amazon service. I think it's called Amazon Underground, which is developers get paid by the amount that somebody uses their app. Rather than actually giving money directly to the developer. If you use an app for an hour, you get 60 units of payment, whatever that happens to be, whether it's per minute or, per hour.
And I think this is probably what's triggered off this weird, oh my god, subscription pricing, have you heard of it, kind of attitude. And obviously, as you say, it's not something new. A lot of people have been doing this for a long time.
Yeah, no, and I've heard people speculate about the App Store going that route as well. I personally don't think it works. I mean, I think it would work for some apps. I mean, it'd be great for games. I think that you could find a way to make that system work with games. But I think, for instance, utility apps that you use occasionally, if you had that kind of model, I think that people just wouldn't make them anymore because they wouldn't be able to make any money.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's kind of interesting because, I've seen a few apps that kind of have this subscription model in the App Store, and I don't know, even somebody like me who, I want to give money to developers, I want to support good apps and things like that. I look at a subscription and I'm kind of like, I don't know if I want to make that kind of commitment.
There's definitely subscription fatigue that sets in after you've got enough of these.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this kind of, relates to the way that a lot of sites are doing kind of a membership model and subscription and things like that. I think you kind of hit a point. I mean, how much money, should I as an individual person be paying out for various different subscriptions, whether that's apps or blogs or memberships and things like that. At some point there becomes an upper limit where I just can't afford to be giving out more money each month.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I mean, I do think that if you're paying one-off for apps, you're going to have more apps than if you are paying a subscription for an app. I mean, I think that you hit the limit a lot faster with a subscription that's a recurring payment. I mean, and I think it can be taken too far. I mean, I recently did a review of this Mail Butler app, which is a series of plugins for the Apple Mail app, and they're useful plugins, but they were selling them as a subscription. I think it was like €8 a month or something like that, which was really odd to me because, first of all, there was no service behind it, no content behind it, nothing that would lend itself to a recurring payment. It wasn't even a standalone app. It was a series of plugins for an existing Apple app, and I just don't think that kind of pricing model works for something like that.
No, I think you're right, and I don't know. It's difficult because there's there's as you say, there's some examples where I think that works. You mentioned Feed Wrangler in the show notes. Like, Feed Wrangler is a good example of something that I'm willing to pay a subscription for. I pay for a year, and if I don't use it in a year, then I can cancel that. And I feel like that's fine because it has a service that I'm actually paying for. Like, that my money is going towards something.
Right. It's actually working in the background, delivering articles to you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think much in the same way as for example, like Club Mac Stories. You can give money to that monthly or yearly, and although it's not kind of the same thing because you can still access the content if you're not a member, but you get extra content for your membership, and like that money helps to pay writers and get more articles and things like that. So I think it's fine even if it's just kind of in my head, but if I'm paying for something that I know needs ongoing money, then I don't mind it too much. But I think some kind of iOS apps maybe go a little bit too far.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things are at play, I think. You're right. Things like you've got like the Feed Wrangler model where you've got a back end that has to be supported, and it's delivered. It's something that every time you use an RSS reader, if you're using Feed Wrangler as the back end, you're using the service. So you're actually getting something in return for it every time you open up an RSS reader. Or you have, like you said, like Club Mac Stories, or like a subscription to HBO or whatever it is. You're getting content delivered to you on a regular basis, right? So those kind of apps or services make sense to me as subscriptions. But the other problem, even when you do have that, is that at some point you reach the point where you look at it and you're thinking to yourself, "Oh, I'm spending like $200 a year on various subscriptions. Who am I going to cut off the list?"
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's hard, maybe if you know people or, the people behind these sites. I mean, I think we've kind of mentioned this in our Slack, but like, I think we're both, members of Relay and Club Mac Stories and Six Colors. that's three right there. You add a couple more to that, and it becomes a significant amount of money each month. And as you say, you really have to think about how much money you're willing to spend out on all of these services.
Yeah, I think you end up having to be more selective, just because you're not gonna. At the end of the day, it ends up being more per year than it would if you're buying one-off apps or something like that. And I guess that's just the point. I mean, I'm happily members of all those things you mentioned, but yeah, there's not a whole lot of room left in my budget. I think if like someone else came out with the next thing, I'd look at everything and think, oh, I don't know, I don't know if I want to spend one more dollar on subscriptions. It gets, it builds up over time.
Yeah, definitely. So I think on the topic of App Store, on the App Store, I think we wanted to talk a little bit about release notes as well.
Yep.
Not the conference, but the actual
right.
honest to goodness release notes that, if you can call them release notes. The release notes that you see when an app gets updated. And there's been a few people writing about this. Ben Brooks has written about it, and Manton Reese has written about it in the last couple of weeks. And there's kind of been this, I'm not sure it's kind of a trend of making your release notes kind of this like weird, like, is it a story, or is it jokes and things like that. And to be honest, I think people are getting really frustrated with them because it's really difficult to actually find out what has changed in the apps.
Yeah, I mean, there are two kinds of release notes that drive me a little nuts. It's probably the ones that drive me the most nuts are the cutesy ones. But there's also the ones like Facebook does, which just says, fixes and improvements or something like that, which is just as bad in its own way. Yeah,
I mean, I think I mentioned to you, and maybe I did on Twitter as well, but my bank added Touch ID support in the last 2 weeks, I think. It's kind of difficult to tell.
I saw you talking to Mike. Yeah, I saw you talking to Mike about that. Neither one of you knew about it, right? Because there was no announcement anywhere.
Yeah, so they'd added Touch ID support to the app, which I only found out about because a friend of mine knew that I was using this particular app and texted me and said, they've added Touch ID support. So I checked the update release notes, and the release notes just said bug fixes.
That's not a bug fix, that's a feature.
This is a feature that I've been waiting for a long time because my bank is particularly bad when it comes to their iOS apps. And I kind of didn't expect it. But to just call it bug fixes, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, well, I think the jokey ones, the reason those exist is partly the App Store's fault because, it's so hard to communicate with people and communicate with the customers of your app that people are reaching and stretching for any possible way to communicate with them, and they figure that jokes and stories and recipes for bug soup and things like that will show some personality and connect with customers in a way that they, one of the few ways that people have to directly reach those people.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's probably another part of this as well, since automatic updates have been a thing, which I guess was iOS 7 maybe. I guess a lot of people aren't even looking at their release notes anymore. I certainly don't.
Yeah, well, that's the other part of this is that, there are the people who are writing these articles about how annoying these release notes are the geeks who actually do go in and read the release notes. I go in and look at them myself. I'm mostly just curious what's new in the apps that that update automatically. I go in every couple of days probably.
Yeah, that's kind of why, if I do look at them, that is why I'm looking, just to kind of see if they've added any new features like my bank. But apparently they're not going to tell me anyway. But yeah, it's, as you say, probably the most vocal people are us, we're the geeks that are going in and looking at release notes and what's changed, and look at Facebook with their stupid version numbers. But you know what? It doesn't really matter. Nobody cares. Like, in the grand scheme of things, they've got however many millions of iOS devices. Nobody cares if Facebook's on version 65. It's not important.
Right. Yeah, no, that's true. One thing that struck me too about the whole discussion was it reminded me a little bit of there was an episode of Under the Radar. I think it was 12. It was I think that was 2 episodes ago or so, and they were talking about adding personality to your apps, and they used Carrot Weather as one of their examples. And they talked about when and if it makes sense to add personality to your apps and what that can do in terms of differentiating yourself in a crowded market. And I think there is a place for that. Absolutely. I think it's a smart thing to do with the right kind of app, but I just don't think that the release notes are the place to necessarily have that personality. Put it in the app, don't put it in the release notes.
Yeah, definitely. And to add to the Carrot Weather thing, I don't understand the obsession with weather apps. I don't have them. I very rarely check the weather, except when me and you were talking before we recorded. You tell me how cold it is in Chicago.
Right.
And then I have a look. So for me, I don't pay any attention to weather apps at all. But Carrot Weather is the only weather app that I could name. And then that probably says a lot about the way that they've kind of branded it and the personality and things like that. So it clearly does work, in at least in some instances.
Yeah, no, it does. I use a weather app mainly because I walk a mile down to the train station in the morning. So if it's 5 degrees Fahrenheit outside, I like to know that before I walk out. But yeah, weather apps are one of those weird categories.
Yeah, I mean, I think for you, as you say, you're walking a fair distance, and you have a lot harsher weather than we do. So I can completely
it's uphill.
understand
It's uphill. It's uphill both ways, Rob.
Of course it is.
Yeah, I'm going to be the angry old man who shouts at the cloud before long here. Yeah, I saw you also linked to keep a change log, which I think it's funny that that there's actually a site dedicated to telling people how to make a change log.
Yes.
How hard is that? It's not that hard.
No, absolutely. I mean, this is I guess it's kind of an attempt at a standard, and this is actually the format that we use at work for our mobile apps. It's not rocket science. This is fairly simple stuff. But this site kind of just tries to give you a good format to use when you add features and fix bugs and things like that. So yeah, I guess it's kind of one of those things where you're making a new standard, and then we just have an extra standard. But it's kind of useful just to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I definitely thought it was useful. I do something very similar. When I'm working on my apps, I have a text document, and every time I change something significant, I just add a sentence or two explaining it to the text document, and then that's what becomes my release notes when I upload something to the store. And I generally use added, changed, fixed, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think that is. I think especially for something like Blink, given the audience that are using Blink, I think that's really useful.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to keep the knock knock jokes out of the app for now.
So I think we're pretty App Store heavy today.
Yeah, we are. It's been on my mind a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was working all day yesterday on trying to find some URL scheme bugs, which. Oh my gosh, I could tell you stories about URL schemes. I'd like to rip all that stuff out of my code. Sorry, URL scheme fans. It's the ultimate technical debt in some levels. Part of the problem was, URL schemes was a big focus of the app when I first built it, when I was first starting building it, because share sheets didn't exist. There were no extensions. And then extensions really obviated most of that functionality, but I kept it in there, and there are uses for it beyond what an extension can do. But for one, I wrote it when I didn't know what I was doing, and it's not very good code. It's kind of messy. And two, it's just one of those things that has so many possible edge cases that there's always something that someone can shoot through the URL scheme that'll break it and crash the app, it seems like. So and the people who like URL schemes are a little rabid about URL schemes, and so they are very vocal.
Absolutely. So this topic, you've kind of titled it "Finding Gaps in the App Store," and I guess it's probably a little bit related to your talk that you're going to be doing pretty soon.
Yeah, it's a little bit. It's one of the things I want to talk about. I mean, I've been trying to think about not necessarily just marketing, but how do you get attention for your app? And there are a lot of different components to getting attention to your app, and including things like finding holes in the App Store. I mean, and that's what I think we're going to talk about today, which is if you can find a hole in the App Store, or at least a shallow part of the pool, then you've got, a fighting chance to be seen on the App Store. There are about 1.5 million apps, and sometimes you look at it and it feels like there are 50 of everything. But there are some spots which are, a little less crowded. And we talked a little bit about one of them a few episodes ago when we were talking about screenshot apps, because maybe there's one out there that I just haven't discovered yet, but there's not a really good screenshot app that puts together both management of screenshots and organization of screenshots. They usually have one or the other, but not both.
Yeah, I think that's kind of, I guess that maybe is kind of just the way people are focusing. But yeah, I mean, as you say, I guess it kind of makes sense that there should be both of those in at least in one app.
And there are categories, and that's just one concrete example. But there are categories, and maybe it's not as true today, but at least early in the App Store, for instance, games filled up pretty fast, obviously, but education and that category was really a backwater for a very long time. It's really picked up since then, but you can find areas where it's not so much that there aren't a lot of apps, but there aren't a lot of good apps. There are a lot of really old or crufty apps that don't work very well, and kind of underserve the market for that particular area that you're working on.
Yeah, definitely. I think we mentioned this maybe on the last episode or the one before that, but there's just this kind of, nobody seems to want to say it, but a lot of apps on the App Store just aren't that good. Of 1.5 million apps, how many of those are, top quality, really good apps? Probably not that many.
No, it's true. I mean, and you look at some categories. If you looked at text editors, you'd think, all right, well, this is a hard one to enter, right? I mean, there are a lot of really good text editors out there, and you're going to be swimming upstream to come up with one that's better than Byword or IA Writer or Editorial or OneWriter, something like one of those apps. But there are plenty of other categories that are not occupied by really polished apps, and it's just kind of these are what I kind of think of as functional gaps in the App Store, areas where either there's not many apps that do what you want to do, or the ones that are there aren't very good. I mean, I ran into another one the other day called Shelf, which I think I saw Bradley Chambers tweet about, and it's kind of a cool app. I mean, it lets you, if you are into this kind of thing, take notes on books that you're reading. And I looked at it and I was like, oh, this is kind of nice. You can automatically pull in the cover art for the book and then keep a series of notes associated with each book. And then I looked at it and I realized it's iPhone only. And I thought, well, what sense does that make? Wouldn't you want to have this right side by side your book on like an iPad Pro or something while you're reading the book? But it's not. And to me, that's a huge miss from the standpoint of that app. That is kind of a gap that I think someone could come in, because it's not a super complicated app. You got to hook to some kind of API to bring in the cover art for the book and do the search function. But other than that, it's just a really basic text editor.
Yeah, as you say, like there's definitely a few apps. And actually, before I started my job that I'm in now, I used to work at McDonald's. So I was doing kind of shift work, and it would never really be the same hours every week, that kind of thing. So obviously I needed an app to kind of keep track of the hours that I've done and calculate, how much money I was going to make that week and things like that. And and actually now my girlfriend does shift work at the job that she's at, and there are no good apps for this. Like, there are
really
nothing. They are all terrible. Every single one of them is terrible.
Yeah, because you want to both plan, you want to keep track of what you did, but also plan out what's coming up in the next week or two, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the core functionality of it is, you give it an hour, you give it a shift, it works out what breaks you're getting, so you're not getting paid for that and things like that, and it works out your wages. Like, it doesn't seem like a hugely complicated app in the grand scheme of things, but like, it's just one of those markets where there are loads of apps in there in the store, but they're all terrible.
Right.
And so, as you say, I mean, I think there are still gaps in the App Store if you can find them.
Yeah, no, I think there are, and that we've been talking about functionality type gaps where there's just the app either doesn't exist or it's not done very well. But getting back for a moment to that episode of Under the Radar we were talking about a little while ago in Carrot Weather, that's a good example of kind of a personality gap, I guess you could call it, where there are a ton of weather apps and a lot of them are really good, and so that's a really hard market to compete in. But Carrot Weather did it by being different, and being different in a way that got attention. They got people talking about it, got people writing articles about it, and at the end of the day, I mean, it's a nice app. It's really well designed. I like it, but it still just is a weather app. I mean, it doesn't really do anything functionally that much different than the built-in weather app. Maybe it does it in a way that you like more, but I think the personality of that app has taken it a lot further than it otherwise would have gotten.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think weather apps are probably one of the simplest apps to build in terms of just the basic functionality, because there's plenty of weather APIs that will just give you the weather for a location. But as you say, even Carrot Weather doesn't have a huge amount of like advanced functionality, but it still appeals and manages to sell really well.
Right. I mean, and part of this, I was thinking about this not just because of what David Smith and Marco Arment were saying on Under the Radar, but there was this article in the Next Web which was about Carrot Weather, and the title of it was "How Carrot Weather and Tweetbot Taught Me That Paying for Apps is a Good Thing," which was an article that really kind of made me. I didn't know whether to be happy about this or sad, because it was depressing, because it was someone in 2016 realizing that there are developers who care, and people who put time and effort into a unique experience on the App Store. It might be actually worth paying them money for their thing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and I think you kind of you linked to a tweet here that we'll put in the show notes where you kind of said you don't know whether to be happy at the realization that developers who charge for apps care, or despair that it's newsworthy. But I think what this article really reflects is what the kind of general audience for iOS feels like. If you go on and look for a Twitter app, for example, and I think that's a fairly good example. Twitter have their official app, which is free. It gives you, for the most part, every feature that you get with Tweetbot. Kind of side by side, and if you're just looking at it on paper, they both have the same features. You can tweet.
Yeah, they actually give you some more too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you get the moments and various other weird things that Twitter are trying out. So on paper, actually the official Twitter app is probably the better one, but actually, when you use Tweetbot, you realize actually this is far, far better.
Right. No, it's true. And I guess so. I think on balance, I'm glad that this article exists, because it's on the Next Web, which is more of a general audience, as you said, and this reflects what the iOS market probably is more like in real life than in the corner of the universe that we occupy, full of geeks. And so it's good that message gets out. And I'd be curious to see if Tweetbot and Carrot Weather saw much of a bump in sales from that article being published. I would suspect that they probably did.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know. I do come across this quite a lot. You're speaking to somebody and they say, "Oh, can you recommend an app? I need to do this, or I want to do that." And as an example, like Twitter, I'd recommend Tweetbot, and then people go, "Oh, $2.99. I'm not paying that." So it's this difficult kind of, as you say, in our corner of the internet, we're all happy to pay for apps, and look at that, somebody's brought out a new app, and even if you've already got one that's similar, you'll probably buy it to try it out, whereas the general population just aren't doing that, I don't think.
No, I make a regular effort to ask people, have they ever bought an app, and it's amazing how many people with solid jobs and high incomes will tell you, "No, I'll never do that. I would never do that."
Yeah, they can't understand why they would pay for an app either. Because it is hard, because you look at a comparable kind of free version of a paid app, and for the most part they kind of do what the paid apps do, but it depends whether you care about that kind of extra quality.
Yeah, well, and I also think for a lot of people, their iPhone is nothing more than a Facebook machine.
Yeah, that's probably part of the problem as well, yeah.
I mean, they get an email once in a while, they send a text message, maybe they could call, and they use Facebook. It's like 4 things.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, okay, well, that's thoroughly depressing.
Well,
As an app developer, it makes me sad.
Well, let's not forget that most people are just using their computers like that as well. I mean, it's most
I know.
for the average user, it's browse the internet, check some email, maybe watch a video on Netflix, that kind of thing. There's probably not a lot of use for advanced apps, but there we go.
That's true. Well, that's what the attention's all about. It's finding those places, right? I mean, educating people as to what they should want and what they really need and what will make their lives better. So it's an uphill battle, but it's one that can be won, I think. Maybe.
Yeah. So I think we've probably gone through the App Store. This has been pretty kind of App Store heavy show, but
yeah.
But no, it's been good. So I don't think we've got anything else this week because we did a lot of the weird, funny stuff at the beginning of the show. So
yeah, we did. So we'll have to come up with some more topics. We'll be back in just 7 days.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully we can think of some things before next week.
All right, good.
So right, so the show notes will be at ruminatepodcast.com/13. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at rmlewisuk. And John, where can people find you?
At John Voorhees on Twitter, and I actually updated my personal projects webpage last weekend, so you can check out johnvoorhees.co if you want to see kind of everything else that I'm working on.
Well, there you go. I haven't even looked at that yet, so I will have a look at that now.
All right.
Perfect. See you later, John.
Okay, bye-bye.